"We're restructuring your department," the new CFO said, not bothering to look up from his Bloomberg terminal. He said it like he was ordering lunch. Dismissive, efficient, like dismantling 15 years of my career was just another line item on his spreadsheet. I didn't react, didn't plead. I just stood there in that mahogany-paneled corner office, my hand resting on a battered briefcase that contained something far more explosive than quarterly reports. But before I tell you what was in that briefcase, you need to understand who I am, and more importantly, who they thought I was. My name is Regina. For 15 years, I've been the conscience nobody wanted. My official title was Senior Director of Internal Audit, which is finance speak for the person who makes sure the numbers aren't lying and the executives aren't stealing. I worked for Meridian Capital Partners, one of those mid-sized investment banks that manages money for pension funds, university endowments, and wealthy families who've never had to check a price tag. The kind of firm where a single bad trade could wipe out retirement accounts, where a single compliance failure could trigger SEC investigations. Under the original founder, Arthur Blackwood, integrity was everything. Mr. Blackwood was an old-school banker who wore the same three-piece suits his father had worn and believed that a clean audit was worth more than a record quarter. He understood that in finance, reputation is everything. One scandal, and your clients vanish like morning frost. He respected the rules. He respected me. He understood that the audit function wasn't overhead. It was the foundation, the thing that made everything else possible. In my 15 years under his leadership, I never once saw him cut a corner, never once saw him prioritize a quick profit over a client's trust. Never once saw him treat compliance as an obstacle instead of a mission. Then Mr. Blackwood retired. The board didn't promote his careful, methodical deputy, a woman named Eleanor who'd been with the firm for 30 years. Instead, they brought in their rising star, Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan was 38, had a Wharton MBA, and a reputation for aggressive growth that somehow made regulators nervous and investors excited. He spoke exclusively in alpha generation and market disruption. He didn't care about risk management. He cared about returns and headlines. He walked in on day one wearing a suit that cost more than my car, followed by a squadron of analysts who looked like they'd been recruited from a hedge fund that specialized in arrogance. Slicked back hair, matching Hermes ties. The uniform of people who've never had to explain a margin call to a widow. The change was immediate, violent. It wasn't just a leadership transition, it was a cultural demolition. The quiet discipline of careful analysis was replaced by the frenzy of momentum trading. The risk protocols I'd spent years building were dismissed as friction holding us back. Friction was Jonathan's favorite word for anything that prevented him from swinging bigger. I watched it all from my office on the third floor, not the executive suite. Audit never gets the corner office with the view of Central Park. We get fluorescent lights and proximity to the filing cabinets. I'm invisible to people like Jonathan, to him. I was just legacy overhead, a compliance relic, a remnant of the Blackwood era who probably didn't understand derivatives. He didn't know that my silence wasn't submission, it was observation. See, in my line of work, you learn to listen more than you speak. You learn that the loudest voice in the room is usually the one cooking the books. Jonathan was very, very loud. He held town halls where he talked about disrupting traditional asset management and pivoting to alternative investments. We're a fiduciary, Jonathan. Our clients trust us with their life savings. We aren't a crypto exchange chasing the next bubble. But he didn't want to hear that. This is probably a good time to pause and say, if you're enjoying this journey into financial carnage, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Leave a like. It really helps the channel. And honestly, it costs you less than the legal fees I was about to avoid. Trust me, this story gets expensive. Okay, back to the disaster. 4 months into his tenure, the purge began. It wasn't dramatic at first, just quiet reassignments. The VP of Risk Management, gone on a Thursday. Email, deactivated by Monday. The head of compliance retired unexpectedly to spend time with family, which is Wall Street code for was pushed out before he could blow the whistle. Jonathan was bringing in his own people. That's standard corporate reshuffling. But these new hires were wrong. They were aggressive traders with impressive returns and zero understanding of how fiduciary duty actually works. I started noticing it in the trade logs. My department is supposed to review every significant position. We verify compliance with investment mandates, check for conflicts of interest, ensure nobody's front-running client orders. Suddenly, trades were bypassing my desk entirely. I'd see massive positions opened in derivatives I'd never approved. I'd see client funds move to accounts that weren't in our custody agreements. I'd see trading patterns that looked suspiciously like insider timing. I went to Jonathan's right-hand man, a guy named Bradley, who wore custom shirts and never made eye contact. "Bradley," I said, holding a printout. "This derivatives position in the Hartley pension account. It's 3 times their approved risk tolerance. It violates their investment policy statement." "Who authorized this?" Bradley laughed. That dismissive chuckle that people make when they think you're too old to understand modern finance. "Regina, you're thinking too conservatively. We're generating alpha. Jonathan approved it personally. Just document it and move on. It's not conservative. Bradley, it's regulatory compliance. ERISA requires us to follow the stated investment objectives. This could cost us our fiduciary certification." "We're optimizing returns," he said, turning back to his screens. "Just document it, Regina, or we can find someone who will. That was the first threat. Subtle, but unmistakable. Get on board or get out." Most people would have backed down. Most people would have polished their resume and started looking for a soft landing. But I'm not most people. I felt something cold crystallize in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the instinct of an auditor who's found the first thread of a fraud. I went back to my office. I locked the door. I logged into the trading system and started doing what I do best. I didn't just document it. I preserved everything. I created a shadow archive. Every time they violated an investment mandate, I noted it. Every time they ignored a compliance flag, I saved the trade confirmation, time-stamped, cross-referenced, backed up to servers they didn't control. They thought they were generating returns that would make them legends. They thought because they had the titles, they had the power, but they forgot one thing. In finance, the paper trail is everything. And I was the one who knew where all the papers were buried. I sat there watching the trading data scroll across my screen, green and red numbers blinking in the darkness of my empty office. I pulled out my access badge, the one with my unflattering photo from 10 years ago, the one with the scratched magnetic stripe that Jonathan had mocked in the elevator last week. He had no idea what this badge could do. The atmosphere shifted from toxic to criminal over the next 8 weeks. Jonathan wasn't just aggressive. He was reckless in ways that terrified me. His strategy seemed to be based on the idea that if you generated enough returns, nobody would question how you got them. Swing big and hide the misses. Except in asset management. The misses aren't just losses. They're other people's retirements, college funds, medical savings. The first major red flag came from an unlikely source, the coffee service. For 20 years, we had a contract with a local vendor who maintained the break room. Simple, professional, forgettable. One Monday, the machines were gone. In their place were sleek espresso stations that required you to scan your employee badge and watch a 30-second video about Meridian's new performance culture before dispensing anything. It's about engagement. The internal memo said, "Every cup is a touch point with leadership." I stood there watching Jonathan's face on a tiny screen, talking about crushing it and maximizing shareholder value while I waited for my coffee. And I realized something. He's bleeding cash. The firm isn't making money. He's cutting the coffee budget to cover trading losses. I went back to my desk and pulled the internal financials. They were hidden behind new permission layers now. But I'm audit. I have access to ledgers they don't even know exist. The numbers were catastrophic. The core wealth management business, the boring stuff that actually paid the bills, was down 18%. Why? Because Jonathan had shifted client assets into high-risk positions that were underwater. Because he'd fired the veteran portfolio managers who understood our clients' needs and replaced them with traders who chased volatility. 3 major pension funds had filed formal complaints about performance. 2 family offices had requested full redemptions. But the real bomb dropped on a Tuesday afternoon. An email landed in my inbox with the subject line, Organizational Efficiency. Audit Function Realignment. I didn't even have to open it to know what it said. I clicked anyway. To better align with our performance-focused culture, the internal audit department will be consolidated under business development, effective immediately. We believe audit is fundamentally a client service function. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my empty third-floor office. Audit isn't client service. Audit is integrity insurance. Putting us under business development was like putting the referee under the control of one of the teams. It meant they wanted us to stop finding problems and start burying them. Half an hour later, the summons came. Not from Jonathan directly, from HR. The new HR director was a woman named Tiffany, who looked like she was 26 and spoke to me like I was a confused grandmother learning to use a smartphone. Regina, she chirped, standing in my doorway without knocking. Do you have a sec? We're doing a security refresh of all legacy credentials. My heart did a slow, heavy beat. My badge. My badge works fine. Tiffany, I said, not looking up from my screen. I was busy transferring my archive to a secure cloud server in Luxembourg that the firm didn't own. Oh, I know. But Jonathan wants everyone on the new biometric system. It's so much more modern. Fingerprint access, facial recognition. We need to collect the old badges to, recycle the hardware, recycle the hardware. They didn't want to recycle it. They wanted to destroy it. They wanted to erase the access logs, the audit trails, the evidence. I'll bring it down later. I lied. I have a regulatory filing to complete. Well, don't take too long. We're deactivating all legacy credentials at 5 p.m. Friday. She left, trailing artificial cheerfulness. I looked at the badge sitting on my desk. To Tiffany, it was a piece of plastic. To me, it was the black box of a sinking ship. 4 years ago, after a devastating trading scandal that cost clients $40 million, the board of directors, the old board under Mr. Blackwood, had panicked. They commissioned a secret initiative called Project Lighthouse. It started with a disaster. One of our senior traders had been running a side book, hidden positions that weren't in the official accounts. For 18 months, he'd been gambling with client money and hiding the losses in offshore accounts. When we discovered it, the damage was catastrophic. 8 institutional clients terminated their relationships immediately. The SEC launched a formal investigation. FINRA issued a censure that cost us 3 seats on key committees. 2 partners were indicted. Mr. Blackwood, aged 15 years, in 15 days. I remember finding him in his office at midnight, staring at a wall covered with client letters. Angry letters. Betrayed letters. Letters from people who had trusted us with everything. Regina, he said without looking at me, I built this firm on one promise. That we would treat our clients' money like it was our own. That we would never sacrifice their trust for our profit. I failed them. We can implement better controls. I said, tighter supervision, more frequent reconciliations. Paper, he replied. All of it is just paper. Controls can be overridden. Reconciliations can be falsified. Supervision can be corrupted. He turned to look at me then. His eyes were red but sharp. I need something different. I need a witness. Someone who isn't interested in bonuses. Someone who cares more about the clients than the quarterly numbers. Someone who watches when everyone else looks away. That was the day Project Lighthouse was born. It wasn't just a compliance program. It was a covenant. The board allocated a confidential budget, brought in forensic accountants from regulatory agencies, built something that operated in the shadows of our own systems. They gave me a badge that looked identical to everyone else's, but embedded in the magnetic stripe was a secondary protocol. Every time I accessed a restricted area, the trading floor, the executive suite, the records room, the badge didn't just log my entry. It initiated a silent capture of the digital environment. What trades were executing, what files were being accessed, what conversations were happening on recorded lines. The data was encrypted with banking-grade security, transmitted to servers in 3 different jurisdictions, backed up to cold storage in a Swiss vault. The decryption keys were held by an external law firm with no connection to our business. Even if someone burned our headquarters to the ground, the record would survive. Even if they fired me, the archive would remain immutable, irrefutable, waiting. Mr. Blackwood called it our conscience, a way to ensure the firm could never betray its clients again. He made me promise to use it wisely, to be a guardian, not a spy, to act only when the integrity of the firm was truly threatened. I kept that promise for 4 years. I watched partners come and go. I documented minor violations and major ones. I reported concerns through proper channels. I tried to be the conscience Mr. Blackwood wanted. But Jonathan Pierce wasn't a minor violation. He was a predator, and predators don't respond to polite memos. Jonathan didn't know about Project Lighthouse. He just knew he wanted me gone and my access revoked. I checked the calendar. Tuesday. I had until Friday to collect everything I needed. The next 3 days were a blur of calculated movements. I attended every meeting I could access. I sat in the back of investment committee sessions where Bradley discussed increasing leverage on the Morrison endowment account. Reckless. I badged into the records room where they were shredding old compliance files. Illegal. I walked the trading floor, my badge silently capturing the digital fingerprints of their crimes. Tuesday was reconnaissance. I mapped their routines. Jonathan liked to hold sensitive conversations in the private dining room, where he thought the ambient noise would mask his words. He didn't know that the fire suppression system in there had an audio sensor that my badge could access. I sat 2 floors below, pretending to reconcile accounts, while the Lighthouse system captured everything. He talked about the Cayman structure, about moving client funds to an offshore vehicle he personally controlled, about how nobody would notice until the returns came in, about finding ways to make the performance numbers look better than they were. He laughed about the pension funds, called them dumb money, said they'd believe any number you put in front of them as long as it was green. I saved every word, every laugh, every moment of contempt for the people whose trust he was betraying. Wednesday was documentation. I cross-referenced the trade logs with the client statements I'd quietly copied from the reporting system. The pattern was clear. The performance numbers clients received didn't match the actual positions. Losses were being hidden in a web of internal transfers. Returns were being fabricated through backdated trades, classic fraud, dressed up in sophisticated language. I found 17 clients whose statements were complete fiction, 8 pension funds, 4 university endowments, 3 family offices, 2 charitable foundations, real people, real institutions, real trust, all of it being systematically betrayed. Thursday was the final harvest. I attended a partners meeting where Jonathan announced plans to launch a new fund, a fund that would pool client money with his own capital, a fund whose structure would make it nearly impossible to trace where the money actually went, a fund designed to make his theft permanent. I raised concerns, politely, professionally. He dismissed them as old-school thinking, said I didn't understand modern finance, said compliance was for firms that couldn't generate real returns. That night, I stayed late, uploaded the final evidence to the Swiss servers, triple-checked the transmission protocols, made sure the dead man's switch was active. If anything happened to me, the archive would transmit automatically to the SEC, FINRA, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. By Thursday afternoon, I felt the walls closing in. My system access started glitching. Random password resets, authentication failures. They were trying to lock me out gradually, hoping I'd resign before they had to fire me. They underestimated my patience. On Friday morning, the calendar invite appeared. Meeting role transition discussion, host Jonathan Pierce, CFO, attendees, Regina, audit, Harrison, general counsel, location executive conference room, time 2 p.m. This was it, the execution, or so they thought. I spent lunch in the park across the street, eating a sandwich I couldn't taste. I watched the glass tower where I'd spent 15 years of my career. From the outside, it looked impressive. Marble and steel catching the afternoon light. Inside, it was rotting. I went back up at 1:55, stopped by the restroom, washed my hands, looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. The fluorescent lights weren't kind to the lines around my eyes or the silver threading through my hair. But my eyes were sharp. They were the eyes of someone who'd checked the books while everyone else was celebrating the bonuses. I took my badge off my lanyard and held it in my palm. Felt the smooth plastic, the weight of 4 years of accumulated evidence. Okay, I whispered to my reflection. Let's go get fired. I walked down the hallway toward the executive conference room. The glass walls were frosted, but I could see the silhouettes inside. Jonathan was standing. Harrison was seated, rigid with visible anxiety. I swiped my badge one final time. The reader beeped. The light turned green. The system logged my entry. User Regina Holloway. Time 1. 59:52 p.m. Status authorized. And the hidden system whispered to servers across the Atlantic, session initiated, chain of custody active. I pushed the door open. The conference room was 15 degrees colder than the rest of the building. Jonathan liked it that way. He said cold kept people sharp. I suspected he just enjoyed watching subordinates shiver. He didn't look up when I entered. He was reviewing something on his tablet, his face lit by the glow of numbers. A performance of supreme importance. Harrison, our general counsel, looked worse. He was a man who'd spent 25 years trying to stay invisible. And under Jonathan, he looked like he was developing an ulcer in real time. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the mahogany table like it might save him. I didn't sit. There was a chair pulled out for me, the one furthest from the head of the table. I remained standing. I placed my briefcase on the table. The soft thud of leather on wood was the only sound in the room. Jonathan finally looked up. He regarded me with the patient condescension of someone explaining compound interest to a child. Regina, he said. I'm sure you understand why we're here. I work here. Jonathan, I didn't come in. I walked down the hall. He smiled, that practiced smile that never touched his eyes. Right. Well, as you know, we're undergoing a significant transformation. We're moving toward a more performance-focused operating model, and in reviewing our cost structure, we've determined that a standalone audit function is no longer optimal. No longer optimal, I repeated. You're firing the immune system of a firm that manages $8 billion in client assets. We're modernizing, Harrison said quietly. He still wouldn't look at me. The audit function will be absorbed into business development. Your specific role is being eliminated. Jonathan leaned forward. We're prepared to offer a generous separation package. 4 months. Full benefits continuation. We'll provide a positive reference. Just sign the release. Turn in your credentials, and we can all move forward. He slid a stack of papers across the table. Standard separation agreement. Probably with enough legal language to fill a law library. I didn't touch it. Is that all? Jonathan blinked. He'd expected tears, arguments, maybe anger. Not this quiet stillness. I think you should take the offer. Regina. His voice hardened. The market isn't kind to auditors your age with your reputation. I reached into my briefcase. Both Jonathan and Harrison tensed. I pulled out a slim manila folder and placed it on the table. What's that? Jonathan asked. Harrison's face had gone pale. He was staring at the folder like it was a live grenade. Jonathan, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Is that badge running a Lighthouse capture right now? Since the moment I walked through the door, Jonathan looked between us, confusion replacing his smugness. What are you talking about? What's Lighthouse? Harrison closed his eyes. It's a board-mandated compliance protocol, Jonathan, implemented after the 2019 scandal. Certain personnel carry credentials with embedded audit capabilities. Everything that happens in restricted areas is recorded and transmitted to an external archive. He opened his eyes and looked at Jonathan with something approaching pity. Everything. Jonathan, every meeting, every conversation, every trade executed while the badge holder is present. For the past 4 months, Jonathan went very still. You're bluffing. I flipped open the manila folder. It wasn't thick, just 18 pages, but each page was a nail in a coffin. Page 1. A summary of investment mandate violations totaling 63 separate breaches across 41 client accounts. Pension funds for teachers. Endowments for universities. Retirement savings for families who trusted us. Every single one exposed to risks they never authorized. Page 2. Transcripts of conversations where Bradley discussed falsifying performance reports to hide trading losses. Direct quotes, time-stamped, with voice pattern analysis confirming identity. He'd laughed while describing how easy it was to fool the clients. Page 3. A timestamp log of Jonathan instructing operations to backdate trade confirmations to make positions look profitable. 17 separate instances, each one a federal crime, each one carrying up to 20 years. Page 4. Evidence of an offshore vehicle in the Cayman Islands that received management fees for a fund that didn't have proper client authorization. A vehicle whose beneficial owner was Jonathan Pierce, $2.3 million siphoned over 14 months, wire transfers that crossed international borders, federal jurisdiction, page 5, documentation showing client statements that reported returns of 12% when actual performance was -8, 20 points of fabrication, sent to clients who made financial decisions based on lies, retirees who thought their money was safe, foundations that planned grants based on fantasy numbers. Page 6. Screenshots of communications between Jonathan and a contact at a competing firm, discussions about sharing client information, about coordinating trades, about how to make it look like independent decisions, market manipulation, the kind that sends people to prison. Jonathan's face had gone from confident to confused to terrified. Each page was another crack in his foundation. This is, Jonathan started. Evidence, I finished. And here's the thing, Jonathan, I didn't just save it to my laptop. I checked my watch. At exactly 1:55 p.m., 4 minutes before I walked into this room, the complete Lighthouse archive was automatically transmitted to 3 locations: the external law firm that holds the decryption keys, the SEC's Enforcement Division, because falsifying client statements triggers federal securities fraud, and the Board of Directors' secure channel. Jonathan's face cycled through several colors. Chairman Morrison is probably reading the executive summary right now. You're lying. Call him. I'll wait. Jonathan grabbed his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it twice. Before he could dial, the phone buzzed. Incoming call. Morrison. Chairman. He stared at the screen. He didn't answer. The phone stopped. Then Harrison's phone buzzed. Then the conference room phone. Then mine. The building's emergency notification system chimed. A calm, automated voice announced that all executive floor personnel should remain in place pending a compliance review. What have you done? Jonathan whispered. What I was hired to do, I said. I protected the clients. Harrison stood up slowly. He looked older than he had 20 minutes ago. Jonathan, he said, I'm going to strongly advise you not to say anything else without personal legal counsel. This firm can no longer represent your individual interests. There's a conflict. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regina, did you know about the Cayman structure? I knew everything. I said, "I've known for 10 weeks. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. I was hoping he'd listen when I raised concerns about the mandate violations. But he didn't want to hear it. He wanted returns." I picked up my badge from the table, clipped it back to my lanyard. "This badge isn't just a piece of plastic. Jonathan, it's a promise. Mr. Blackwood gave it to me because he understood something you never will. In this business, we're not managing money. We're managing trust. If we betray that trust, we don't deserve to exist." Jonathan slumped in his chair. The polished confidence was gone. He looked like what he was, a man who'd built his career on other people's money and had finally run out of luck. The door opened. 2 security officers stepped in. Professional, serious. They knew me. They asked about my daughter's recitals. They weren't here for me. "Mr. Pierce," the lead officer said, "we've been instructed to escort you to the lobby. You're not permitted to return to your office. Your access has been terminated." Jonathan looked at me one last time. "You're destroying your own career," he said. "Nobody will trust you again." "You're unemployable," I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd felt in months. I'm not the one being walked out of the building I tried to rob. Jonathan. And I'm not the one who's going to be explaining the Cayman structure to federal prosecutors. They walked him out. He didn't go quietly. He was shouting about wrongful termination and conspiracy all the way to the elevator. When the doors closed, the silence rushed back. Harrison was still there, pale and shaken. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now the cleanup begins. The board will want answers. The clients will need reassurance. The SEC will have questions about the performance reporting." I looked at him steadily. "You're going to be very busy, Harrison, but if you cooperate fully, if you help me reconstruct every position Jonathan touched, I'll make sure the board knows you were operating under duress." He nodded slowly. "Thank you. Regina." "I don't need thanks. I need the encryption keys to Jonathan's private trading records, the ones he kept on the shadow server. You have them, don't you?" He hesitated, then nodded again. "Good. Because we have about 40 minutes before the regulators arrive, and I want to show them exactly how deep this goes." 4 months later, the firm is quiet again. Boring. Even. It's wonderful. The walls are the same wood-paneled elegance they've always been. The trading floor hums with careful, methodical work. The compliance protocols are back in place, stronger than before. We rebuilt everything Jonathan had corrupted, hired back the portfolio managers he'd pushed out, restored proper risk limits on every account, contacted every client whose mandate had been violated, made them whole where we could, apologized where we couldn't. The hardest calls were to the pension funds, teachers in Ohio who trusted us with their retirement, nurses in Michigan whose savings had been gambling chips. I made those calls personally, sat in conference rooms with union representatives who had every right to sue us into oblivion, explained what happened, showed them the new controls, promised it would never happen again. Most of them stayed, not all, but most. They said they respected how we handled it. They said they'd rather work with a firm that caught its own criminals than one that pretended to be perfect. It cost us $60 million in client remediation, $40 million in legal fees, another $20 million in regulatory penalties. That's what cutting corners really costs, not the profits on paper, the cleanup when it all collapses. Our assets under management dropped during the transition. Of course they did. When your CFO gets arrested for securities fraud and your firm announces a comprehensive compliance review, investors get nervous. We lost $2 billion in redemptions the first month, but it's stabilizing. New clients are calling. Clients who read the coverage and decided they wanted a firm that took integrity seriously. Clients who'd been burned by other managers and wanted someone they could trust. More importantly, the clients who stayed trust us more than ever. They saw how we handled it. They saw that we chose integrity over self-protection. They saw that when we found a cancer, we cut it out instead of hiding it. Jonathan took a plea deal. Turns out federal prosecutors have significant leverage when they have time-stamped evidence of you directing falsified performance reports, when they can prove you personally benefited from an unauthorized offshore structure, when they have recordings of you discussing how to hide losses. He's doing 42 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. He's banned from the securities industry for life. The SE added a separate civil penalty, $12 million. Last I heard, he's planning to write a book about resilience and reinvention, about how he was victimized by outdated regulations and overzealous enforcement. I'm sure it'll sell dozens of copies, mostly to people who didn't read the indictment. Bradley cooperated with investigators and received probation. He testified against Jonathan in exchange for immunity on the fraud charges. He's selling insurance in Connecticut now, somewhere that values aggression less than our industry did. The Cayman structure was unwound. The money was traced and returned. Most of it went to the clients whose accounts had been manipulated. Mr. Blackwood's widow sent me a handwritten note after the sentencing. She'd read about the case in the Wall Street Journal. She wrote that Arthur would have been proud, that he always believed I was the conscience of the firm. I framed that note. It hangs in my office next to my CPA license and a photo of my daughter at her college graduation. As for me, I'm exactly where I've always been, 3rd floor, near the filing cabinets, close to where the numbers live. But my title changed. Chief Compliance Officer. It's a real title now, with a real seat on the investment committee, with real authority to stop things before they become disasters. The board couldn't fire me. They couldn't buy me out. The Lighthouse system made me untouchable, not because I wanted power, but because the firm needs someone who can't be pressured into looking away, someone whose job is to remember when everyone else wants to forget, someone who serves the clients, not the partners. People walk differently around me now. There's a rumor that I can see every trade before it settles. I can, but I only look when something triggers the monitoring flags. Phrases like off book or hide the loss. I'm the ghost in the ledger, the conscience of the capital. And I'm fine with that. New analysts are warned about me on their first day. Don't try to cut corners. The veterans whisper, Regina will know. Regina always knows. It keeps them honest. It keeps the client safe. It keeps the money where it belongs. Tonight, I'm the last one in the building again. The cleaning crew is vacuuming the hallway. The same hallway where Jonathan told me my department was being restructured. I wave to them. They wave back. Maria asks about my weekend plans. I tell her I'm thinking about finally taking that vacation. I walk over to the window that looks out at the city. The lights of the financial district are twinkling in the darkness. Trading floors humming. Money moving. The machinery of capitalism grinding forward. It's not glamorous work. It's not disruptive. It's just careful, honest protection of things that matter. I touch the badge clipped to my lanyard. The magnetic stripe inside is quiet now. No active sessions, no chain of custody recordings, just a piece of plastic with my face on it. But it's ready. It's always ready. I turn off the lights. I walk to the elevator. The night guard, Marcus, nods as I pass. Heading home, Regina. Heading home, Marcus. Everything quiet. Everything's quiet. Just the way we like it. I step out into the cool night air. The city is still awake. Taxis honking. Restaurants buzzing. The eternal energy of a place that never sleeps. Somewhere out there, someone is falsifying a report. Somewhere, someone is hiding a loss. Somewhere, someone is betraying a client's trust because it's easier than telling the truth. Somewhere, someone is convincing themselves that the rules don't apply to them. But not here, not tonight. Not on my watch. I think about all the invisible guardians out there, the auditors and compliance officers and risk managers, the ones who check the numbers while traders take credit, the ones who say no when saying yes would be profitable, the ones who remember that every dollar represents someone's trust. We're the immune systems of the financial world. the antibodies that attack fraud before it metastasizes, the safeguards between greed and the people who would suffer from it. Most days, nobody notices us. We're just the boring people on the third floor who send emails about policy updates, the ones who slow down deals with compliance reviews, the ones who ask uncomfortable questions about risk. But when something goes wrong, really wrong, we're the ones who step up. We're the ones with the evidence. We're the ones who remember every promise that was broken, every rule that was bent, every warning that was ignored. We see everything. We remember everything. And when someone makes the mistake of thinking we don't matter, we're ready. Underestimated, overlooked. Essential. Some lessons you learn the hard way, and some lessons you teach. Thanks for watching, you guardians of the ledger. Hit that subscribe button unless you're my old boss, in which case, enjoy the prison library. Comment. Share with anyone who's ever been told their concerns were just friction. Share with anyone who knows what it's like to be the last line of defense between greed and someone's retirement. Share with anyone who's ever protected something because it was right, not because it was easy, because there are always more stories where this came from. And somewhere out there, another conscience is watching, waiting, documenting everything. The books always balance eventually, even when management doesn't want them to. Especially when management doesn't want them to.